Readers are welcome to leave comments in the comments section.
The rain over Chelsea did not fall so much as it leaned against the floor-to-ceiling glass, heavy and rhythmic, blurring the grid of Manhattan into a smear of yellow taxi light and wet asphalt. Inside the 7th-floor studio, the only illumination came from a single brass task lamp tilted over a 5-foot drafting board. Maya Lin calibrated her silver compass, her fingers steady despite the clock on the exposed brick wall reading 1:14 a.m. Her dark hair was pinned back haphazardly with a wooden pencil, a few soft strands falling across her collarbone. She was precision incarnate, tailored linen trousers, a cream silk blouse rolled at the elbows, and a mind that calculated load-bearing stress down to the millimeter. She rolled out the vellum tracing paper, smoothing the edge with the flat of her palm. A sharp, deliberate click echoed down the concrete hallway. Maya paused. The building's elevator required an encrypted fob after 9. Click. 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 The high heels were unhurried, echoing off the minimalist gallery walls outside her studio door. Maya set down the compass. Before she could stand, the heavy glass door swung inward, bringing with it a gust of cold rain-scented air and the quiet, undeniable authority of Genevieve Vance. Genevieve didn't apologize for intruding. She never did. She stood in the doorway, shaking out a wet black umbrella before resting it against the steel frame. She wore a tailored charcoal trench coat, left unbuttoned to reveal a slip of dark emerald silk underneath. Her blonde hair was slightly damp from the storm, tucked behind one ear, exposing the sharp, breathtaking line of her jawline. Her eyes, a startling, cool gray, swept the room before settling entirely on Maya. "You're still here," Genevieve said. Her voice was low, carrying a smooth, honeyed rasp that stripped the room of all coldness. Maya straightened her back, adjusting her cuffs. "Our presentation is at 8 tomorrow morning, Ms. Vance. Someone had to ensure your living room ceiling doesn't cave in under the weight of your ego." A slow, deliberate curve formed at the corner of Genevieve's lips. She stepped deeper into the space, the muted scent of rain, cedarwood, and expensive amber trailing in her wake. "I told you to call me Genevieve," she replied, her voice dropping an octave as she crossed the polished floor. "And my ego is structurally sound, Maya. It's your deadlines I was concerned about." Genevieve stopped right at the edge of the drafting table. She didn't look at the blueprints. She looked directly into Maya's eyes, holding the gaze until Maya felt her own pulse flutter against her neck. "I brought a bribe," Genevieve said softly. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a heavy crystal bottle of small batch bourbon, setting it on the blueprint beside Maya's hand with a soft, heavy thud. "I don't drink on the job," Maya said, her voice remaining quiet, controlled. "It's past 1 in the morning. This isn't the job anymore." Genevieve slid off her trench coat, draping it over the back of Maya's vacant leather chair. Underneath, the emerald dress draped over her shoulders with effortless grace. Genevieve picked up 2 heavy glass tumblers from the small credenza near the window, poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into each, and handed one to Maya. Their fingers brushed, just a fraction of an inch, skin sliding over skin, and a sharp, electric jolt ran up Maya's arm. Maya's eyes flicked up, catching the subtle flicker of amusement in Genevieve's gray eyes. Genevieve had felt it too. "To structural integrity," Genevieve murmured, lifting her glass. Maya hesitated, then clinked her glass against Genevieve's. "To staying within the lines." Genevieve took a slow sip, her dark eyes locking onto Maya over the rim of her glass. "The lines are the most boring part of your work, Maya. I hired you because of what you do between them." Genevieve turned her attention to the blueprint spread across the table. She leaned forward, resting both hands on the edge of the dark wood, effectively trapping Maya between her body and the edge of the table. She was close enough that Maya could feel the heat radiating off her skin, close enough to hear the faint, rhythmic sound of her breathing. "Explain this," Genevieve whispered, pointing a manicured nail at the master suite layout. Maya swallowed, her composure hanging by a thread. She leaned down slightly to point at the graphite lines, conscious of how Genevieve's shoulder pressed gently against hers. "It's the partition for the glass balcony," Maya said, trying to keep her tone academic. "You wanted transparency, but you also wanted privacy. So I designed a double-layered frosted panel system. It shifts depending on where you stand in the room." "Shift it for me," Genevieve murmured. She didn't look at the paper. She had turned her head, her face mere inches from Maya's cheek. Maya turned her head slow, met by the full force of Genevieve's gaze. The distance between their lips was less than 3 inches. The room fell entirely silent, save for the steady drumbeat of rain against the windowpane. "It's an optical illusion," Maya said, her voice barely above a breath. "If you stand right here." She tapped the paper. "You see everything. But if you take one step back." "I don't take steps back," Genevieve interrupted softly. Her gaze drifted down to Maya's lips, then back up, heavy and deliberate. "You know that about me by now, don't you?" Maya's throat felt dry. She set her glass down on the table, the ice clinking softly. "You're distracting me, Genevieve." "Good." Genevieve didn't budge. Instead, she reached out, her fingers warm and surprisingly gentle as she brushed a loose lock of dark hair behind Maya's ear. Her thumb lingered for a second on the sensitive skin of Maya's jawline, sending a shiver straight down Maya's spine. "You've been staring at graphite all night. You needed a distraction." Maya didn't pull away. Every instinct taught her to maintain boundaries, to build thick, soundproof walls around her personal life. But Genevieve Vance operated like a demolition crew, quiet, methodical, and entirely impossible to stop. "Is this how you treat all your contractors?" Maya asked, her voice laced with a dangerous edge of playfulness. "Only the ones who look at me like they want to re-architect my entire life," Genevieve replied smoothly. Genevieve took half a step closer. Her knee brushed against Maya's leg, pinning Maya lightly against the edge of the drafting desk. Maya felt her heart hammer against her ribs, a violent rhythm that contradicted her calm expression. "You think you have me figured out, Maya," Genevieve murmured, reaching down to slide her hand over Maya's hand, where it rested on the blueprint. Her palm was warm, her touch firm. She guided Maya's fingers along the lines of the paper, tracing the layout of the penthouse. "You think I want symmetry, balance, perfection, don't you?" Maya asked, her breath catching as Genevieve's fingers intertwined with hers. "I want tension," Genevieve corrected softly, her thumb stroking the back of Maya's hand. "I want something that feels like it's about to break, but holds together anyway because the foundation is too strong to tear down." Genevieve leaned in closer, her lips hovering near the shell of Maya's ear. "Just like this." Maya closed her eyes for a split second, taking in the warmth of Genevieve's breath against her neck, the clean, addictive scent of her perfume, the quiet weight of her presence. It was intoxicating, overwhelming, and completely unprofessional, and Maya realized, with a sudden pang in her chest, that she didn't care about the rules anymore. When Maya opened her eyes, Genevieve was looking at her with a quiet, fierce intensity that made Maya's knees feel weak. "Tell me to leave," Genevieve challenged in a whisper, her eyes dark, teasing, and infinitely warm. Tell me you want to work alone, Maya. Say it, and I'll walk out that door right now. Maya looked at the door. Then she looked back at Genevieve, at the curve of her collarbone, the lingering warmth in her grey eyes, the subtle smile playing on her lips. Maya reached up, her fingers hesitating for a fraction of a second before resting against Genevieve's waist, pulling her a millimeter closer. The storm is too bad outside, Maya murmured softly, her eyes locked on Genevieve's. It wouldn't be safe for you to drive. Genevieve's smile widened, rich and victorious. She reached up and pulled the wooden pencil from Maya's hair, letting Maya's dark waves tumble down around her shoulders. Then I guess I'm staying, Genevieve said, her voice dripping with quiet warmth. She turned, sliding onto the edge of the drafting table right beside Maya's work, picking up her glass of bourbon. She didn't leave Maya's personal space, her thigh remained pressed against Maya's, a constant, burning reminder of her presence. Now, Genevieve said, tapping the glass against the blueprint. Show me where the bed goes. Maya felt a flush creep up her neck, but a genuine, unbidden smile broke across her face. She picked up her pencil, leaning over the table, her shoulder pressed firmly against Genevieve's. Only if you promise not to interrupt, Maya said. I make no such promises, Genevieve replied smoothly, taking another sip of her drink. Outside, the rain continued to pour over Manhattan, washing away the city noise, leaving only the amber light of the lamp, the smell of cedar and bourbon, and two women sitting entirely too close in the quiet heart of the night. The clock on the wall crept past 2:30 a.m. with the quiet, relentless precision of a pendulum. Inside the studio, the rain had softened from a torrential downpour into a steady, hypnotic murmur against the glass. The air was thick with the scent of dried graphite, warm wool, and the sweet, oaky warmth of bourbon left in the bottom of glass tumblers. Maya's hand moved across the tracing paper, guided by the mechanical pencil in her right hand. But her left hand was no longer resting idly on the board. Genevieve's fingers remained intertwined with hers, a quiet anchor resting on the edge of the dark mahogany drafting table. Every time Maya shifted to reach for a ruler or adjusting her compass, Genevieve's grip didn't loosen, it adapted, her thumb tracing small, deliberate circles on the back of Maya's wrist. You're making it hard to draw a straight line, Maya murmured, her eyes fixed on the scale model layout of the penthouse living room. You don't need a straight line, Genevieve replied, her voice soft, carrying the relaxed, dangerous calm of someone who controlled every room she ever entered. She took a sip from her glass, her eyes reflecting the dim yellow glow of the brass task lamp. Straight lines are predictable. I don't pay you for predictable, Maya. Maya looked up, her gaze rising from the neat grid of paper to Genevieve's face. In the shadow of the desk lamp, Genevieve looked less like the formidable venture capitalist featured on the cover of Forbes and more like a mysterious sculpture brought to life. Her grey eyes were steady, stripped of the sharp corporate armor she wore during daytime meetings. This entire building rests on predictable angles, Maya said, a tiny smile touching the corner of her mouth. If I start taking liberties with the load-bearing pillars because you're holding my hand, the city inspectors will shut us down before sunrise. Let them try, Genevieve murmured smoothly. She didn't let go. Instead, she leaned in slightly, her shadow merging with Maya's on the wall behind them. Tell me about this wall. The one facing south. Maya took a small breath, trying to steady the pulse thumping against her throat. She tapped the graphite tip onto the south wing layout. It's a floor-to-ceiling glass partition with smart tint technology. In the morning, it catches the natural light coming off the Hudson River. At night, with the touch of a single panel, it turns completely opaque. Why opaque? Genevieve asked softly. She shifted her position on the desk, her knee once again sliding against Maya's leg. Do you think I have things to hide? Everyone with a penthouse in Manhattan has things to hide, Maya shot back, her tone playful yet laced with a dangerous undercurrent of intrigue. Or at least, things they don't want the rest of the world staring at. And what about you? Genevieve asked, her grey eyes narrowing with intense, quiet curiosity. What do you hide behind those neat blueprints and tailored silk blouses, Maya? Maya felt her breath catch. The distance between them had shrunk again. Genevieve's presence was magnetic, filling the silent space of the loft with a heat that made the cold rain outside seem miles away. I don't hide, Maya whispered, her eyes lowering to Genevieve's lips before rising back to meet her gaze. I just prefer structure over chaos. Structure is just chaos under control, Genevieve said. She reached out with her free hand, her fingertips brushing lightly along the lapel of Maya's cream silk blouse, right over the steady, heavy beat of Maya's heart. And right now, your structure is giving way. For 3 long seconds, neither of them moved. The room felt stripped of air, reduced entirely to the sound of their shared breathing and the distant hum of night traffic on 10th Avenue. Maya didn't step back. She leaned into the touch, her heart hammering wildly against Genevieve's fingertips. Before the moment could snap, a low whistle sounded from the small kitchen nook in the back of the studio. The automatic espresso machine, set on a pre-programmed timer for 3 a.m., had begun its grinding cycle. The sudden sound broke the spell, though neither woman looked flustered. Genevieve let out a soft, throaty laugh, a rich, genuine sound that sent a warmth straight through Maya's chest. She slowly withdrew her hand, resting her knuckles against Maya's cheek for one fleeting, tender second before sliding off the drafting table. It seems your coffee maker agrees that we need a break, Genevieve said, smoothing down the front of her emerald silk dress with practiced elegance. I set it yesterday morning, Maya admitted, rubbing the back of her neck as she straightened up from her stool. I fully expected to be passed out on the sofa by now. You're not sleeping tonight, Genevieve said, walking over to the small kitchen nook as if she owned the space. She picked up 2 ceramic mugs, setting them under the silver spout. Not when we have an 8 o'clock pitch to the board, and certainly not while I'm here. Maya watched her from the drafting table. There was something undeniably captivating about watching a woman who commanded billion-dollar hedge funds casually brewing espresso in a cluttered architectural studio at 3 in the morning. Genevieve moved with absolute grace, her movements unhurried, radiating an effortless authority that Maya found dangerously attractive. Genevieve returned, holding 2 steaming cups of dark, velvety espresso. She handed one to Maya, her fingers brushing Maya's again, a slow, intentional touch that made it clear the earlier proximity was no accident. Thank you, Maya said, taking a sip. The rich, bitter liquid burned her tongue slightly, grounding her back in reality. Come here, Genevieve said quietly, turning toward the floor-to-ceiling glass windows at the front of the loft. Maya followed her, bringing her cup. They stood side by side in the dark loft, looking out over Chelsea. The rain had finally ceased, leaving the streets below glistening like black obsidian under the street lamps. In the distance, the High Line Park snaked through the neighborhood, quiet and empty under the night sky. I bought the penthouse because of this view, Genevieve said softly, her reflection ghostly against the dark glass. When you spend your entire life analyzing risk and managing people's money, everything feels calculated. Everything has a formula. But standing up here, looking at the city before it wakes up. She paused, turning her head to look at Maya. It's the only time things feel unpredictable. Maya looked at Genevieve's profile, the sharp line of her nose, the curve of her jaw, the way the dark nightlight caught the edges of her silver earrings. Is that why you came here tonight? Maya asked quietly. To find something unpredictable. Genevieve turned her whole body to face Maya, stepping close enough that the hems of their clothes touched. She reached out, taking Maya's espresso cup from her hand and setting it down on a nearby side table without looking. I came here because I couldn't stop thinking about the architect, Genevieve said, her voice dropping into a thrilling, intimate whisper that sent shivers straight down Maya's spine. Maya's breath hit her throat. Genevieve. Tell me I'm wrong, Genevieve challenged softly, taking another half step forward until Maya was gently backed against the cool surface of the glass window. Genevieve raised her hand, her fingers gently cupping Maya's cheek, her thumb tracing the soft curve of Maya's lower lip. Tell me you were only thinking about column placements and glass thickness all night. Maya felt the glass cool against her back, contrasting sharply with the intense, radiating heat of Genevieve's body inches away. She looked into Genevieve's grey eyes, seeing no hesitation, no corporate games, just raw, unfiltered desire wrapped in quiet elegance. I wasn't, Maya confessed softly, her voice barely a whisper. She reached up, her hand finding Genevieve's waist, her fingers gripping the smooth emerald silk. I haven't thought about anything else since you walked through that door. A quiet, satisfied smile spread across Genevieve's lips. She didn't rush. Slowly, deliberately, Genevieve leaned down, her lips brushing against the corner of Maya's mouth, a whisper-like touch that was pure agony and absolute sweetness all at once. Maya gasped softly, her grip tightening on Genevieve's waist, pulling her closer. Genevieve shifted, her lips moving to Maya's jawline, leaving a trail of soft, lingering kisses down the sensitive skin of her neck. Maya leaned her head back against the window, her mind spinning, every professional boundary she had built over a decade crumbling into dust. Genevieve, Maya breathed, her hands sliding up Genevieve's spine, feeling the warmth and tone of her muscle beneath the silk. I'm right here, Genevieve murmured against her neck, her breath hot against Maya's skin. Genevieve pulled back just enough to look Maya in the eyes. Her gaze was dark, filled with an unspoken promise that made Maya's knees feel dangerously weak. Genevieve reached up, gently undoing the top button of Maya's silk blouse, her fingers warm against the collarbone. We have 4 hours before the sun comes up, Genevieve whispered, her grey eyes locked onto Maya's. And I don't want to talk about blueprints anymore. What do you want to talk about? Maya asked, her voice raspy, her fingers tangling in the soft, damp waves of Genevieve's blonde hair. Us, Genevieve said firmly. And what happens when this project is over? Before Maya could answer, Genevieve closed the remaining distance between them, pressing her lips to Maya's in a real, breathless kiss. It was deep, slow, and intoxicating, a perfect blend of sweet indulgence and overwhelming demand. Maya melted into it, her arms wrapping around Genevieve's neck, pulling her impossibly close as the city outside slept under the fading storm clouds. By 6 a.m., the first pale blue light of dawn broke over the Manhattan skyline, painting the clouds over the East River in soft hues of rose and gold. Inside the loft, the storm had completely passed. The brass task lamp was finally switched off. Maya was sitting on the plush leather sofa near the window, a fleece blanket draped over her shoulders. Her head was resting on Genevieve's shoulder. Genevieve sat beside her, one arm wrapped around Maya's waist, holding her close while reading over the final printed project portfolio with her free hand. The atmosphere between them had shifted from electric tension to a quiet, profound intimacy, the kind that felt effortless, as if they had been doing this for years instead of hours. Section 3 looks flawless, Genevieve said softly, kissing the top of Maya's head. The board is going to eat out of your hand. Maya stirred, letting out a small, contented sigh as she looked up at Genevieve. You mean out of our hands? No, Genevieve corrected gently, looking down at her with a look of fierce pride. You did the brilliant work, Maya. I'm just the one smart enough to recognize it, and lucky enough to keep the architect. Maya smiled, reaching up to adjust the lapel of Genevieve's jacket, which Genevieve had put back on over her dress. You're very confident for someone who hasn't slept in 24 hours. I thrive under pressure, Genevieve replied, a playful smirk touching her lips. She leaned down, giving Maya a quick, sweet kiss on the lips. Now, get up. You need to fix your hair, and I need to make sure my lead consultant looks like the genius she is when we walk into that boardroom at 8. Maya stood up, stretching her sore muscles, a warm feeling expanding in her chest that had nothing to do with the espresso. She looked at the drafting table, at the scattered papers, the empty glass tumblers, and the silver compass resting beside the completed plans. The boundaries were gone. The structure had changed. And as Maya looked at Genevieve standing by the window, glowing in the soft morning light, she knew there was no going back to straight lines. The corner of 51st and Park Avenue at 7:45 in the morning was a chaotic symphony of yellow taxis, steaming sidewalk grates, and crisp wall coats moving in brisk synchronization. The headquarters of Vance Capital rose 54 stories into the bright cloudless Manhattan sky, a monolith of smoked glass and blue steel. In the executive private lounge on the 52nd floor, Maya stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror, smoothing down the lapel of her fitted ivory blazer. She had showered in the private in-suit adjoining Genevieve's office suite, replacing her rumpled studio clothes with a spare tailored ensemble she always kept hanging in her office trunk for sudden client emergencies. Her dark hair was pinned up in a neat, elegant twist, a few rebellious tendrils framing her jawline. Her heart beat with a steady, rhythmic cadence, partly from the upcoming high-stakes pitch, but mostly from the lingering sensation of Genevieve's hands, the memory of her taste, and the thrilling knowledge of what had transpired between them in the shadows of Chelsea just hours prior. The frosted glass door of the lounge clicked open. Genevieve stepped in, impeccably restored to her role as one of Wall Street's most formidable venture capitalists. She wore a bespoke obsidian suit tailored so sharply it looked like armor, paired with a silk blouse the color of crushed pearls. Her blonde hair fell in smooth, glossy waves over her shoulders, and her gray eyes were clear, sharp, and entirely focused. Yet, as the glass door settled shut behind her, the icy corporate mask dissolved into something infinitely warmer. Genevieve walked straight up to Maya, closing the distance until the subtle scent of black pepper and amber filled Maya's senses. Without a word, Genevieve reached out, her long fingers delicately adjusting the lapel of Maya's blazer before sliding up to touch the soft skin of her neck just behind her earlobe. "You look stunning," Genevieve said softly, her voice carrying that intimate, low timbre that set Maya's pulse racing. "You look like you're about to buy half the city and fire anyone who looks at you wrong," Maya countered, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "Is this the corporate persona I'm competing with today?" Genevieve's thumb stroked the line of Maya's collarbone for one fleeting, warm second. "You aren't competing with anyone, Maya. Today, you own the room. I'll just be holding the floor." And if the board questions the cost of the custom glass partition? Maya asked, leaning slightly into Genevieve's warm touch. Then I will remind them that they work for me, and that genius doesn't answer to accounting, Genevieve murmured, her eyes dropping down to Maya's mouth. She leaned in, her lips lightly brushing Maya's cheek, a soft, lingering kiss that left a faint trail of heat against her skin. Ready? Always, Maya said quietly. The main conference room of Vance Capital was an intimidating space designed specifically to shrink human ego. A 20-foot table carved from a single slab of polished black quartzite sat in the center, surrounded by 12 ergonomic leather chairs. Outside the double-paned glass perimeter, Midtown Manhattan spread out like a sprawling grid of stone and glass under the brilliant morning sun. 8 senior board members and regional development directors sat around the perimeter, sipping artisanal black coffee from white porcelain cups and shuffling tablet computers. Among them sat Arthur Sterling, a senior equity partner known for his razor-thin patience and deep skepticism toward high-end architectural expenditures. Genevieve took her position at the head of the long table, leaning her hands lightly on the dark quartzite surface. Her presence immediately drew every eye in the room to attention. "Good morning, everyone," Genevieve began, her voice ringing clear, smooth, and commanding through the silent room. "We are here to review the final architectural blueprints for the Hudson Penthouse project. Over the past 3 months, we have explored several standard luxury concepts. None of them met the standard of innovation required for this flagship property. Last night, our lead consultant completed a redesign that shifts the entire paradigm of the space." Genevieve turned slightly, her gray eyes locking onto Maya standing at the head of the digital presentation display. A micro-expression of warmth flashed across Genevieve's face, so fast that no one else in the room could possibly register it. "Ms. Lin, the floor is yours." Maya stepped forward, picking up the sleek digital stylus. As she tapped the screen, a 3-dimensional rendering of the Chelsea penthouse illuminated the dark wall behind her, rendering the open concept layout in hyperrealistic detail. "Thank you, Ms. Vance," Maya said, her tone professional, measured, and dripping with quiet authority. For the next 15 minutes, Maya took command of the room. She spoke with absolute fluency, navigating complex load-bearing logistics, natural light diffusion, and structural steel integrations with fluid grace. She explained how the double-layered frosted glass panel system would react to daylight, creating an evolving play of shadows throughout the private quarters. The objective was not merely to construct a shelter above the city, Maya explained, her fingers tracing the perimeter of the living suite on the screen. It was to create a dialogue between privacy and openness. "We wanted a structure that holds firm against external elements, yet remains fluid and responsive to the person living inside it." She caught Genevieve's eye across the long expanse of the table. Genevieve sat back in her chair, her fingers loosely laced together over her tablet. Her posture was relaxed, but her gaze was fixed entirely on Maya, intense, proud, and blazing with quiet admiration. "It's a charming concept, Ms. Lin," Arthur Sterling interrupted, leaning forward and resting his elbows on the black stone. "However, the structural modifications to the south load-bearing wall require an additional $4 million in specialized engineering. Vance Capital thrives on precision and efficiency. Isn't this frosted glass partition an unnecessary, expensive luxury?" A heavy silence settled over the boardroom. The other board members shifted in their seats, looking between Arthur and Maya. Before Maya could speak, Genevieve's voice cut through the air like a silver blade. "Precision is not the absence of luxury, Arthur," Genevieve said quietly, turning her head toward Sterling. It is the mastery of it. Genevieve tapped her pen once against her tablet. The south wall partition isn't decorative. It is the defining signature of the property. When you build something that forces people to look closer, you increase its value tenfold. Ms. Lin's design doesn't just manage space, it creates emotional resonance. And in our market, emotional resonance commands the highest yield. Genevieve looked back at Maya, her lips curving into a subtle, dangerous smile that made Maya's heart do a quiet flip inside her chest. Unless, Arthur, Genevieve added, her voice dropping into a razor-sharp whisper, you believe your judgment regarding high-value acquisitions surpasses mine. Arthur swallowed hard, looking at the quiet determination in Genevieve's eyes, then down at the flawless financial projection numbers displaying beside Maya's blueprints. No, Genevieve, Arthur admitted, clearing his throat. The numbers speak for themselves. They certainly do, Genevieve said smoothly. She turned her attention back to the rest of the board. If there are no further objections, I am authorizing the construction phase to begin immediately under Ms. Lin's exclusive supervision. All in favor? Every hand around the table rose without hesitation. Motion passed, Genevieve declared, closing her folder with a crisp, final snap. Thank you, everyone. That will be all for this morning. Within 3 minutes, the boardroom cleared as executive assistants and directors filtered out into the bright corridors, eager to return to their morning trades and meetings. The heavy glass doors closed with a soft, magnetic thud, leaving only Maya and Genevieve inside the vast, sunlit space. Maya stood by the presentation screen, turning off the projection system. She let out a long, slow breath, feeling the intense adrenaline of the past hour finally begin to recede, leaving a delightful warmth in its wake. She heard the deliberate sound of high heels crossing the hardwood floor toward her. Genevieve stopped right behind Maya. Without saying a word, she reached out, her hands coming around Maya's waist from behind, pulling Maya back against her chest. Maya let out a soft gasp as Genevieve rested her chin lightly against Maya's shoulder, her warm breath catching the sensitive skin of Maya's neck. You were extraordinary, Genevieve whispered into her ear, her arms wrapping securely around Maya's waist, holding her close against her body. Maya smiled, resting her hands over Genevieve's arms, feeling the smooth wool of her tailored jacket and the firm warmth beneath it. She leaned back against Genevieve, allowing herself to enjoy the heavy, comforting weight of the embrace. I had very good backup, Maya murmured, turning her head slightly so her cheek brushed against Genevieve's hair. You tore Arthur to pieces in less than 20 seconds. Arthur is a bean counter, Genevieve replied smoothly, her lips finding the crook of Maya's neck, pressing a soft, slow kiss against her skin that made Maya shiver. He sees numbers. I see vision. And more importantly, I see you. Genevieve turned Maya gently in her arms until they were standing face to face in the bright morning sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city below was humming with life, but up on the 52nd floor, time seemed to stand completely still. Genevieve reached up, her fingers sliding into the dark waves of Maya's hair, undoing the clip holding it in place. The dark hair tumbled down over Maya's shoulders, catching the golden sunlight. Genevieve, someone could walk past the glass corridor, Maya warned softly, though she didn't step back. In fact, her hands found the lapels of Genevieve's blazer, holding her close. The glass turns opaque with a touch, Genevieve murmured, reaching out with her thumb to hit a small silver toggle on the wall panel beside them. Instantly, the clear glass doors running along the corridor shifted into a milky, solid frost, isolating them entirely from the outside world. Genevieve looked back at Maya, her grey eyes dark with affection, pride, and an undeniable hunger that sent a thrill straight through Maya's core. "Now," Genevieve said, her voice dropping into a breathless whisper as she cupped Maya's cheek. "Where were we before Arthur interrupted us?" Genevieve didn't wait for an answer. She leaned down, capturing Maya's lips in a deep, passionate kiss that wiped away every lingering thought of business, blueprints, and corporate decorum. Maya wrapped her arms tightly around Genevieve's neck, pulling her closer, tasting the rich coffee and sweet warmth on her lips. The kiss was slow, deliberate, and full of triumph, a shared celebration of power, partnership, and the undeniable force pulling them together. When Genevieve finally pulled back, her breath was uneven, a rare and beautiful break in her perpetual composure. Her grey eyes searched Maya's face, bright with genuine joy. "Come away with me this weekend," Genevieve whispered, her forehead resting gently against Maya's. "No blueprints. No board meetings. Just a private estate in Montauk, the ocean, and you." Maya looked at Genevieve, feeling a surge of happiness so strong it made her breathless. She reached up, her thumb tracing the soft curve of Genevieve's cheek. "Is that a command from the venture capitalist?" Maya teased softly. Genevieve smiled, a soft, rare, radiant expression reserved only for Maya. "It's a plea from the woman who can't spend another night without you," Genevieve replied gently. Maya's smile widened, rich and tender. She leaned up, pressing one more lingering, sweet kiss against Genevieve's lips. "Then I guess you'd better clear your schedule, Ms. Vance," Maya murmured against her mouth. "Because I'm not letting you go." The Friday afternoon sun hung low over Long Island, casting long, golden shadows across the asphalt as the black Aston Martin DB11 carved its way east along Route 27. The air had changed somewhere past Southampton, the heavy, metallic hum of Manhattan giving way to the crisp, salty tang of Atlantic sea breeze blowing through the cracked passenger window. In the driver's seat, Genevieve handled the sports car with the same calm, effortless precision she applied to managing billions in capital. She had shed her corporate armor for a cream cashmere sweater with sleeves pushed up past her forearms and dark sunglasses resting atop her blonde hair. Her left hand gripped the leather steering wheel, while her right rested casually on the center console, her fingers intertwined with Maya's. Maya leaned back into the butter-soft leather seat, letting the ocean wind tangle her dark hair. Her laptop was shut and tucked away in the back seat, buried under a pile of overnight duffels. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't monitoring a construction timeline or reviewing a structural integrity report. "You're staring," Genevieve said, her voice rich with amusement, though her eyes remained focused on the winding stretch of Montauk Highway ahead. "I'm observing," Maya corrected softly, her thumb stroking the back of Genevieve's knuckles. "It's rare to see you without 3 executive assistants hovering within arm's reach or a phone ringing every 40 seconds. Genevieve threw both phones into the glove compartment before we crossed the Shinnecock Canal, Genevieve reminded her, a wicked, triumphant grin flashing across her profile. "They can burn the building down for all I care. Until Monday morning, Vance Capital doesn't exist." Maya laughed, a light, carefree sound that seemed to dance on the ocean breeze. "That sounds dangerously irresponsible for a woman who prides herself on absolute control." "I have total control," Genevieve murmured, her voice dropping an octave as she briefly turned her head to meet Maya's gaze, her grey eyes warm and mischievous under the shade of the windshield. "I'm exactly where I want to be, with exactly who I want to be with." The highway narrowed as they approached the tip of the South Fork, passing low pine scrub, rolling sand dunes, and weathered cedar-shingled beach houses tucked behind wild beach plum bushes. Genevieve turned off the main road onto a private gravel driveway winding up a high bluff overlooking the ocean. The car tires crunched softly against the pebbles, coming to a stop in front of a modern architectural masterpiece that made Maya's jaw drop. The house was a seamless fusion of weathered teak, dark steel, and expansive glass cantilevered directly over the roaring Atlantic waves 50 feet below. It didn't fight the rugged landscape, it leaned into it, capturing the wild energy of the ocean while offering total, secluded sanctuary. "You built this," Maya breathed, leaning forward to take in the clean lines and incredible integration with the coastline. "I had it built 3 years ago," Genevieve corrected gently, cutting the engine. The quiet roar of the ocean instantly filled the silence. "I wanted a place where the world couldn't reach me. I've never brought anyone here before, Maya." Maya turned to look at Genevieve. The weight of that admission hung between them, soft, profound, and full of quiet vulnerability. "Never," Maya whispered. Genevieve reached out, her hand gently cupping Maya's cheek, her thumb brushing over Maya's lower lip with unbearable tenderness. "Never. This place was meant for peace, and until I met you, my life didn't have room for peace." Maya felt a tightness in her throat, a swell of emotion so strong and genuine it took her breath away. She leaned into Genevieve's palm, closing her eyes for a brief second to absorb the warmth of her skin before opening them again to meet Genevieve's steady, devotion-filled gaze. "Let's go inside," Maya said softly. The interior of the Montauk estate was minimalist yet incredibly warm. Polished concrete floors were softened by thick wool rugs, and a floor-to-ceiling stone fireplace stood unlit near a wide deck that overlooked the endless blue horizon. The setting sun was already painting the sky in deep washes of lavender, burnt orange, and violet. Genevieve carried their duffels into the master suite while Maya walked straight to the sliding glass doors leading out onto the oceanfront deck. She stepped outside, leaning against the wooden railing, inhaling the sharp, exhilarating cold of the Atlantic air. A moment later, she felt Genevieve step up behind her. Genevieve wrapped a heavy cashmere blanket around both of their shoulders, pulling Maya back against her chest. Her arms wrapped around Maya's waist, locking them together as the wind rustled through the grasses on the bluff below. "Cold?" Genevieve asked into the crown of Maya's head, her chin resting gently on Maya's shoulder. "Not at all," Maya replied, resting her hands over Genevieve's forearms, leaning back into the solid, comforting heat of Genevieve's body. "It's breathtaking, Genevieve. The way the light hits the water from this angle, it's pure poetry." "I don't care about the water," Genevieve whispered, her voice low and raspy against Maya's ear. Maya turned her head slightly, catching Genevieve looking down at her, not at the magnificent sunset, but at Maya's face, tracing every detail with an intensity that made Maya's heart beat wildly against her ribs. Genevieve reached up, gently tucking a wind-blown strand of dark hair behind Maya's ear, her fingers lingering against Maya's cheekbone. "You spent weeks analyzing my penthouse blueprints," Genevieve murmured, her grey eyes dark with a mixture of affection and quiet desire. "You calculated every wall, every beam, every window to keep the world out. But you never built a single boundary against me." Maya's breath caught in her chest. She turned fully in Genevieve's arms, the heavy cashmere blanket draping over both of them like a private tent against the cool evening air. "I tried," Maya admitted softly, a small, candid smile touching her lips as her hands found the back of Genevieve's cashmere sweater, pulling her closer. "The night you walked into my studio at 1 in the morning, I had 5 different reasons ready to throw you out. Why didn't you?" Genevieve challenged softly, her lips hovering an inch from Maya's. "Because the moment you looked at my work, the moment you looked at me. I realized I didn't want boundaries anymore, Maya whispered. Not with you. Genevieve closed the tiny distance between them, her lips meeting Maya's in a slow, lingering kiss that tasted of ocean salt and sweet warmth. It wasn't the hurried, electric kiss of the studio or the high adrenaline celebration of the boardroom. It was patient, deep, and dripping with an overwhelming tenderness that made Maya's knees feel weightless. Maya sighed into the kiss, her hands sliding up Genevieve's back, her fingers tangling in the soft, thick waves of blonde hair. Genevieve pulled Maya tighter against her, her hands pressing into the small of Maya's back, grounding her against the wind and the crashing waves below. When they finally parted, the sky had darkened into a deep, midnight indigo, illuminated only by the brilliant scatter of coastal stars and the pale yellow glow of the distant Montauk Point lighthouse. Come inside, Genevieve whispered against Maya's forehead, her breath warm in the night air. I made a promise to take care of you this weekend, and it starts with dinner. Maya laughed softly, her heart overflowing with a quiet, blissful contentment. You cook? I excel at many things, Ms. Lin, Genevieve replied smoothly, taking Maya's hand and leading her back through the heavy glass doors into the warmth of the house. You're about to find out. An hour later, the master suite was lit only by the soft, amber glow of a low fire crackling in the corner fireplace. Outside, the ocean crashed rhythmically against the shore, a continuous, soothing heartbeat that echoed through the glass walls. They had abandoned the formal dining table for the massive plush rug spread out before the fire. A wooden platter of artisanal cheeses, cured meats, and fresh figs sat largely untouched beside a freshly opened bottle of vintage Pinot Noir. Maya was lying on her side, her head propped up on her hand, watching Genevieve stir the embers of the fire with her iron poker. Genevieve had traded her cashmere sweater for a loose, oversized silk button-down shirt that hung off one shoulder, her blonde hair messy and loose. You look different here, Maya said softly. Genevieve set the iron poker down with a soft metallic clink and turned around, sitting cross-legged on the rug beside Maya. Different how? Less like an empire builder, Maya said, reaching out to trace the line of Genevieve's collarbone with her index finger. More like the woman who buys bourbon at midnight just to keep me awake. Genevieve let out a quiet, throaty laugh, reaching out to capture Maya's hand, kissing the soft center of her palm. That bourbon was an investment, Maya. And considering the returns, it was the best deal I've ever closed. You're impossible, Maya smiled, but her eyes softened, filled with an undeniable, deep affection. Genevieve shifted forward, hovering over Maya, her grey eyes reflecting the warm orange light of the crackling fire. She reached down, gently undoing the top button of Maya's soft flannel shirt, her warm fingers brushing against the sensitive skin of Maya's throat. I'm completely serious, Genevieve whispered, her voice dropping into that quiet, magnetic tone that sent tremors straight down Maya's spine. I spent 10 years building a life where no one could touch me. Where every person wanted something from me, money, influence, power. Then you walked into my project office with a pencil in your hair and looked at me like I was just another puzzle to solve. You are a puzzle, Maya murmured, reaching up to wrap her arms around Genevieve's neck, pulling her down until their chests pressed together. And I'm still solving you. Good, Genevieve whispered, her lips brushing against Maya's jawline, trailing soft, lingering kisses down to the hollow of her collarbone. Because I intend to make it a lifelong project. Maya's breath hitched in her throat at the word, lifelong. It hung in the warm, scented air of the room, heavy with promise and absolute truth. Genevieve leaned up, her grey eyes locking onto Maya's with a fierce, unwavering devotion. She reached down, her warm hand sliding up Maya's waist under her shirt, her fingers gently pressing against Maya's ribs, pulling her so close there was no air left between them. "Stay with me, Maya," Genevieve whispered, her voice raw, stripped of all armor, showing only the pure, intense affection she held inside. "Not just for the weekend. Not just until the penthouse is finished. Stay with me." Maya looked up into the eyes of the woman who had demolished her carefully built world and replaced it with something infinitely more beautiful. She reached up, cupping Genevieve's face in both hands, her thumb tracing the high curve of her cheekbone. "I'm not going anywhere, Genevieve," Maya answered softly, her voice steady and full of total certainty. "I'm right where I belong." Genevieve's expression broke into a breathless, radiant smile. She leaned down, closing her mouth over Maya's in a kiss that was pure poetry, deep, sweet, and overflowing with a passion that burned brighter than the fire beside them, keeping them warm against the cold, roaring ocean night. The dawn came to Montauk not with a sudden burst of sunlight, but with a slow, velvet gradient of pale rose, lavender, and silver spreading over the Atlantic Ocean. Inside the master suite, the fire had reduced to a bed of glowing mahogany embers, casting a soft, warm amber halo across the hardwood floor. Maya woke to the gentle, rhythmic pressure of Genevieve's fingers tracing tiny, meaningless patterns along the curve of her waist. Maya's head was pillowed on Genevieve's shoulder, her face tucked into the warm hollow of her neck, inhaling the lingering, intoxicating scent of cedarwood, silk, and ocean mist. She shifted slightly, letting out a small, contented sigh, and felt Genevieve's arm tighten around her instantly, holding her flush against her body. "Morning," Genevieve murmured, her voice heavy with sleep, rough and honeyed in the quiet room. She leaned down, pressing a soft, lingering kiss into Maya's tangled dark hair. "What time is it?" Maya asked, her voice a lazy whisper, her hand resting over Genevieve's ribs, feeling the slow, steady rise and fall of her chest. "Early," Genevieve answered smoothly, her thumb stroking the sensitive skin right above Maya's hip bone under the soft cotton sheet. "Early enough that the rest of the world is still asleep. Early enough that you don't have to think about a single blueprint." Maya raised her head, resting her chin on Genevieve's chest to look up at her. In the soft, diffused morning light, Genevieve looked completely unguarded, her sharp corporate edges completely melted away, her dark grey eyes filled with a quiet, profound sweetness that made Maya's heart ache with affection. "You're dangerously good at making me forget my responsibilities, Miss Vance," Maya teased softly, a tender smile touching the corners of her lips. "That is my primary objective," Genevieve replied, a faint, playful smirk appearing on her face. She reached up, gently tucking a loose strand of dark hair behind Maya's ear, her knuckles lingering against Maya's cheek. "Now, put on something warm. I want to show you something." 10 minutes later, they stepped out of the glass terrace doors directly onto the private wooden staircase leading down to the beach. The air was crisp and shocking, carrying the raw, salty energy of the open ocean. A thin layer of low-hanging sea fog drifted over the white sand, making the shoreline look like an endless, ethereal dreamscape. Maya wore an oversized cream cable-knit sweater borrowed from Genevieve's closet that fell past her thighs, paired with dark leggings. Beside her, Genevieve wore a heavy charcoal wool coat over a navy cashmere hoodie, her hands tucked deep into her pockets as her bare feet sank into the cool, damp sand. They walked side by side along the edge of the water, where the sea foam washed over the wet shore in quiet, rhythmic sweeps. Genevieve didn't say anything for a long time, content simply to walk beside Maya, their shoulders brushing gently with every step. There was no pressure to fill the air with noise, The quiet understanding between them was so solid, so effortlessly comfortable, that words felt almost redundant. When I was 22, I thought success meant building something so high that no one could ever reach me, Genevieve said suddenly, her voice carrying over the sound of the crashing waves. She looked out toward the horizon, where the sun was finally cutting through the fog, turning the water into liquid gold. I thought if I made enough money, bought enough properties, and built high enough walls, I would finally feel safe. Maya stopped walking, turning to face her. And did you? Genevieve stopped too. She pulled one hand from her coat pocket and reached for Maya, taking her hand and pulling her close until their boots were almost touching in the sand. I built the walls, Genevieve said softly, her grey eyes locking onto Maya's with intense, unfiltered honesty. And for 10 years, it was cold, quiet, and completely empty inside them. Then you came along, Maya, and with a single drawing pencil, you showed me that a house isn't built out of steel or glass. It's built out of warmth. Maya felt a lump form in her throat. The sheer sincerity in Genevieve's voice, combined with the wild, romantic expanse of the Atlantic beach, made her feel as though she were floating. She reached up, both of her hands coming up to cup Genevieve's jaw, her thumbs tracing the high line of her cheekbones. I didn't break down your walls, Genevieve, Maya whispered, her gaze soft and steady. I just built a door. And I'm never locking it. Genevieve let out a soft, breathless laugh, a sound full of genuine, unbridled relief and happiness. She closed her eyes for a second, leaning into Maya's warm touch, before opening them again to pull Maya into a deep, agonizingly sweet kiss. The wind whipped around them, blowing Maya's dark hair across Genevieve's cheek, but neither of them cared. The kiss was slow, intense, and rich with unspoken promises, a quiet, powerful declaration of two souls finding their true home in each other. When Genevieve pulled back, her breath caught in her throat as she looked down at Maya. Let's build a life together, Maya. Maya's eyes widened slightly, her breath catching. Genevieve. I don't mean just the penthouse, Genevieve clarified, her hands coming around Maya's waist, holding her firm and secure against her body. I mean everything. I want you in my morning coffee. I want you in my weekend escapes. I want to wake up with your head on my shoulder every single day for the rest of my life. Maya looked into the grey eyes that had once intimidated half of Wall Street, now soft and wide with quiet vulnerability, waiting for her answer. A radiant, beautiful smile spread across Maya's face. She leaned up on her tiptoes, pressing her lips firmly against Genevieve's in a short, ecstatic kiss before resting her forehead against hers. Yes, Maya whispered against her lips, her hands tangling in the soft blonde hair at the nape of Genevieve's neck. Yes, Genevieve. Absolutely yes. By noon, the fog had completely cleared, leaving behind a brilliant, sapphire blue sky that mirrored the shining ocean. They had moved from the beach up to the sunlit wooden deck of the house. A low glass table was set with fresh croissants, smoked salmon, and fresh orange juice. Genevieve sat in a low teak lounger, her laptop finally open on her lap, not for work, but because she was showing Maya potential properties in upstate New York for a collaborative architectural retreat they were planning to design together. Maya sat between Genevieve's legs, leaning her back against Genevieve's chest. Genevieve's left arm was wrapped securely around Maya's shoulders, her chin resting on Maya's head while her right hand scrolled through property listings on the trackpad. Look at this one, Genevieve murmured, pointing at a photograph of a 40-acre estate in the Hudson Valley with an old timber barn and a private lake. We could keep the original timber frame, install floor-to-ceiling glass on the west side to catch the sunset, and convert the lower level into your private design studio. Maya leaned her head back, looking up at Genevieve's jawline from below. Are you commissioning me for another project, Miss Vance? I'm commissioning you for every project I ever do for the rest of my natural life, Genevieve said smoothly, without dropping her gaze from the screen, though a triumphant grin spread across her lips. And my rates are non-negotiable. Is that so? Maya asked, turning around in Genevieve's lap so she was facing her, straddling her thighs on the wide lounger. She reached out, gently closing the laptop screen with one finger and pushing it onto the table beside them. Genevieve raised an eyebrow, her grey eyes glittering with dark, playful intrigue as her hands automatically found Maya's hips, holding her steady. Did I say you could close my laptop, architect? I'm adjusting the layout, Maya whispered, sliding her hands up Genevieve's cashmere hoodie, feeling the smooth, firm skin beneath. She leaned in close, her lips hovering just millimeters from Genevieve's mouth, feeling the rapid increase of Genevieve's breath against her own skin. You have too many distractions in front of you. You are my only distraction, Genevieve corrected softly, her hands tightening on Maya's hips, pulling her down until there was zero space between them. Genevieve captured Maya's mouth in a sudden, possessive kiss that wiped every thought of real estate, blueprints, and Hudson Valley estates clean from Maya's head. It was hot, demanding, and utterly sweet, a burning reminder of the undeniable chemistry that had drawn them together in a stormy Chelsea studio and held them fast ever since. Maya gasped into the kiss, her hands wrapping tightly around Genevieve's neck, melting into the heat and safety of her embrace. When the kiss finally eased, they stayed wrapped in each other's arms under the brilliant Montauk sun, the sound of the ocean performing a steady, timeless rhythm below them. The structure was complete. The foundation was indestructible. And as Maya looked into Genevieve's clear, loving eyes, she knew that whatever walls they built from this day forward, they would always build them together. For months had transformed the raw concrete shell on West 24th Street into a masterpiece of glass, shadow, and warm timber. It was late October, and dusk over the Hudson River arrived early, bleeding across the western sky in hues of burnt plum and cool violet. Maya stood in the center of the vast, open-plan living hall of the Hudson Penthouse. Her hard hat rested on a nearby marble kitchen island, replaced by her usual dark wool sweater and tailored trousers. She held an iPad containing the final inspection checklist, her index finger hovering over the screen, but her eyes were fixed on the perimeter glass. The double-layered frosted partition system, the very design Arthur Sterling had fought so aggressively in the Vance Capital boardroom, stood completed. In the fading natural light, the panels caught the purple twilight, refracting it into soft, velvety bands across the polished smoked oak floorboards. It was no longer a theoretical rendering on tracing paper. It was real. It was solid. It was breathtaking. A quiet chime echoed from the private elevator foyer at the far end of the gallery. Maya turned, setting her tablet down on the marble counter. The heavy bronze doors slid open, revealing Genevieve standing inside. She was coming straight from an evening summit at the New York Stock Exchange, clad in a sleek midnight navy tuxedo suit with silk lapels. Her blonde hair was swept back into an elegant chignon, and her sterling silver earrings caught the soft lead cove lighting of the foyer. For a brief second, Genevieve stood in the frame of the elevator, taking in the finished space. Then her grey eyes moved past the 50-foot glass walls, past the bespoke Italian furnishings, and locked onto Maya. The stern, distant aura of the corporate titan melted away instantly, replaced by a deep, quiet warmth that turned Maya's blood to liquid fire. You finished it, Genevieve said quietly. Her voice carried across the silent room, smooth and rich. The final inspection wrapped 20 minutes ago, Maya replied, her voice soft, a genuine smile spreading across her lips as Genevieve walked toward her. The city building inspector signed off on the load-bearing pillars without a single note. Genevieve stopped in front of Maya, closing the physical gap between them until the faint, familiar scent of cedarwood, white tea, and crisp autumn night air wrapped around Maya's senses. Genevieve didn't look at the ceiling or the marble. She reached out, her long fingers gently sliding over Maya's jawline, resting against the pulse point on her neck. "I don't care about the building inspector," Genevieve murmured, her thumb stroking the soft skin right below Maya's earlobe. "How does the architect feel?" Maya leaned into the touch, closing her eyes for a brief, blissful moment, feeling the heat of Genevieve's hand grounding her after months of exhausting construction deadlines. "The architect is completely awestruck," Maya whispered, opening her eyes to meet Genevieve's grey gaze. "And slightly exhausted." "Then let me take care of you," Genevieve whispered back, her voice dropping into a raspy, intimate register. Genevieve leaned in, her lips finding the sensitive hollow beneath Maya's jaw, pressing a slow, deliberate kiss there that made Maya's breath hitch in her chest. Maya's hands automatically found Genevieve's waist, her fingers gripping the fine silk lapels of Genevieve's tuxedo jacket, pulling her close until their bodies were pressed together in the quiet hall. "Genevieve," Maya breathed, her mind spinning as Genevieve's lips trailed up to the corner of her mouth. "The crew left 30 minutes ago, but..." "Then we are entirely alone," Genevieve interrupted softly against Maya's lips. Genevieve closed the tiny remaining space between them, capturing Maya's mouth in a deep, slow kiss. It tasted of lingering dark coffee, autumn wind, and pure, intoxicating devotion. Maya sighed into the kiss, her arms sliding up around Genevieve's neck, pulling her down, tangling her fingers in the neat blonde hair at the base of Genevieve's neck, loosening the neat chignon until soft waves fell loose over her shoulders. When Genevieve finally pulled back, her breath was warm against Maya's face, her grey eyes dark with an intense affection that left Maya feeling utterly weightless. "Come here," Genevieve whispered, taking Maya's hand and leading her toward the south wing, toward the frosted glass partition system. They stood before the double-layered glass panels. The city lights of lower Manhattan were beginning to flicker on outside, casting a constellation of gold and white specks against the dark river. Genevieve reached out, her fingers resting lightly on the smooth, cool edge of the glass panel Maya had spent late nights in Chelsea designing. "Show me how it shifts," Genevieve murmured, turning her head to look down at Maya. "Show me what you built for me." Maya stepped close behind Genevieve, her chest pressing against Genevieve's back. She reached around Genevieve's waist, her hand sliding over Genevieve's hand where it rested on the wall control panel embedded in the bronze frame. "Watch the river," Maya whispered into Genevieve's ear, her breath fluttering the small hairs near Genevieve's temple. Maya pressed the integrated touch sensor. With a silent, fluid glide, the primary frosted panel slid 6 inches to the left, aligning its microscopic internal louvers with the outer glass. In less than 2 seconds, the milky, translucent glass dissolved into absolute, crystal-clear transparency. The sprawling panoramic view of the Hudson River, the glowing statue in the distance, and the glittering grid of Manhattan flooded into the room, vast and overwhelming. Genevieve let out a soft, appreciative gasp. "And if you want privacy?" Genevieve asked softly, her head leaning back slightly against Maya's shoulder, enjoying the feel of Maya's arms wrapped securely around her waist. "If I want privacy," Maya whispered, her hand sliding down to touch the secondary sensor, "I do this." Maya touched the sensor again. The glass did not return to milky frost. Instead, the smart tint technology activated, turning the glass into a deep, obsidian mirror from the outside, while remaining completely dark and soft on the inside. The bright lights of the city outside were muted into a gentle, golden twilight, isolating the interior of the penthouse into a private, impenetrable world. Genevieve turned in Maya's arms, her hands coming up to rest on Maya's shoulders. The dim amber light of the integrated Cova LEDs reflected in her dark grey eyes. "It's flawless, Maya," Genevieve said, her voice filled with a profound, quiet awe that made Maya's chest swell with pride. "It's the most magnificent space I've ever stood in." "It was designed for a very demanding client," Maya teased gently, a soft, affectionate smile touching her lips as she reached up to adjust the lapel of Genevieve's jacket. Genevieve didn't smile back immediately. Her expression grew quiet, intense, and deeply tender. She reached into her inner coat pocket, her fingers pulling out a small, velvet-lined box. She didn't open it like a traditional gift. Instead, she tipped it into her palm, revealing a heavy, custom-crafted silver key fob engraved with the minimalist coordinates of the West 24th Street building. Genevieve took Maya's right hand and pressed the heavy silver key into her palm, closing Maya's fingers over it. Maya looked down at the silver key, then back up into Genevieve's eyes, confusion flitting across her face. "Genevieve, this is the master access fob for the penthouse. The property management team needs this for the listing walkthroughs next week." "There are no listing walkthroughs," Genevieve stated calmly. Maya froze. "What?" "I pulled the property off the market 3 weeks ago," Genevieve said, her voice steady, warm, and entirely devoid of hesitation. "I bought out the equity partners' shares in the development. Vance Capital doesn't own this penthouse anymore, Maya." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She looked around at the vast, gorgeous space, at the custom timber, the sweeping glass, the roaring skyline outside, and then back at Genevieve. "You bought it?" Maya whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Genevieve, this property is worth $28 million. "I don't care what it's worth," Genevieve interrupted softly, taking a step closer, cupping Maya's face in both of her hands, forcing Maya to look directly into the depth of her grey eyes. "I didn't build this place to sell it to some anonymous hedge fund manager, Maya. I let you design it because from the very first night you sat at your drafting table in Chelsea, I knew I wanted a home with you." The word hung in the quiet, glass-enclosed space, home. Maya felt tears prick the corners of her eyes, a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion washing over her that rendered her completely speechless. For years, she had built homes for other people, calculating square footage, managing clients, creating physical spaces for families she would never meet. She had spent her entire life building sanctuaries for everyone except herself. "Genevieve." Maya's voice broke softly. "This is ours," Genevieve whispered, her thumbs gently wiping away a single stray tear from Maya's cheek. "If you want it. A place where you don't have to hide behind deadlines. A place where we can watch the rain over the river together. A place where you can draw whatever you want, and I can just love you in peace." Maya let out a shaky, breathless laugh, her heart bursting with a warmth so immense it felt as though it might break her chest open. She looked at the silver key in her hand, then threw her arms around Genevieve's neck, pulling her close with all the strength she possessed. Genevieve caught her, wrapping her arms tightly around Maya's waist, lifting her slightly off her feet as she buried her face in the crook of Maya's neck, inhaling deeply. "Yes," Maya cried softly into Genevieve's shoulder, her fingers gripping the navy fabric of her jacket. Yes, Genevieve. God, yes. Genevieve set Maya back down onto the polished oak floor, but she didn't let go. Her hands remained firmly planted on Maya's waist, her eyes glowing with a quiet, triumphant joy that Maya had never seen on her face before. Slowly, tenderly, Genevieve leaned down, capturing Maya's lips in a kiss that was no longer marked by the cautious tension of hidden glances or secret meetings. It was open, free, and overflowing with an absolute, unconditional love. Maya yielded to the kiss entirely, her body relaxing against Genevieve's firm frame. Outside, the night settled deep over Manhattan, the city lights shimmering across the surface of the dark river like a million scattered diamonds. Inside the glass sanctuary high above the streets, surrounded by the walls they had designed together, there were no more secrets, no more boundaries, and no more straight lines to follow, only the endless, beautiful horizon of the life they were building side by side. The first Saturday in the penthouse arrived with a quiet, pale brilliance. Sunlight streamed through the uncurtained glass perimeter of the east wing, cutting long, amber bands across the dark oak floorboards. The vast apartment, still mostly empty save for a few plush rugs and carefully selected pieces of furniture, smelled of freshly polished timber, roasted espresso beans, and the crisp, cold air drifting from the open terrace door. Maya stood near the marble kitchen island, holding a white ceramic mug in both hands, watching the steam curl into the sunbeams. She wore a pair of soft grey linen trousers and an oversized black cashmere sweater that belonged to Genevieve, the sleeves pushed up past her forearms, revealing the slender line of her wrists. Behind her, the quiet sound of bare feet padded across the floor. Two warm arms slid around Maya's waist from behind, pulling her back against a soft, firm chest. Genevieve rested her chin lightly on Maya's shoulder, letting out a low, contented sigh against the side of Maya's neck. Genevieve was dressed with equal simplicity, a cream silk tank top, loose ivory cotton trousers, her blonde hair tumbling in soft, unstyled waves over her shoulders. "You're up early," Genevieve murmured, her voice laced with the heavy, sweet raspicross of sleep. "I couldn't sleep," Maya admitted softly, turning her head slightly to press her cheek against Genevieve's warm temple. "Every time I opened my eyes, I kept expecting to be back in my cramped apartment in Brooklyn, worrying about project deadlines." Genevieve let out a low, throaty laugh, her arms tightening around Maya's waist. She leaned in, pressing a slow, lingering kiss into the hollow beneath Maya's jaw, her warm breath sending a familiar, electric shiver straight down Maya's spine. "You're never going back to that apartment, Maya," Genevieve whispered against her skin, her thumb gently stroking the fabric of the sweater right over Maya's hip bone. "This is your space now. Our space." Maya set her coffee mug down on the marble counter and turned around in Genevieve's embrace, resting her hands on Genevieve's waist. She looked into those striking grey eyes, which were soft, clear, and glowing with an quiet, unshakable devotion. "It still feels surreal," Maya murmured, her eyes tracing the familiar contours of Genevieve's face, the sharp line of her cheekbones, the faint, tender smile playing on her lips. "For months ago, I was terrified you were going to reject my floor plans. Now I'm standing in your kitchen in your sweater. My sweater looks infinitely better on you than it ever did on me," Genevieve countered smoothly, her hands sliding up Maya's back, her fingers tangling in the dark waves of Maya's hair. She pulled Maya a millimeter closer, her gaze dropping to Maya's mouth. "And for the record, I was never going to reject your floor plans. I was just looking for an excuse to keep you in my office past midnight." Maya let out a soft laugh, her heart doing a quiet, familiar flip inside her chest. "You were playing a dangerous game, Ms. Vance." It was the only game worth playing, Genevieve whispered. Genevieve closed the tiny distance between them, capturing Maya's lips in a deep, morning soft kiss. It was slow, unhurried, and dripping with a relaxed, domestic intimacy that felt entirely new and endlessly sweet. Maya melted into the kiss, her arms wrapping securely around Genevieve's neck, pulling her close as the warm morning sun washed over them both. When Genevieve finally pulled back, her eyes were dark with quiet affection. She tapped Maya's nose gently with her index finger. "Come with me," Genevieve said, taking Maya's hand and tugging her softly toward the north corridor. "Your final delivery arrived late last night while you were asleep." The north wing had been designated as Maya's private studio space, a 50-foot room surrounded on two sides by floor-to-ceiling glass, offering an unobstructed view of Midtown Manhattan and the quiet greenery of the High Line below. Maya had expected the room to be filled with stacked cardboard boxes containing her reference books, rolled drafting papers, and personal art tools. Instead, as Genevieve pushed open the double timber doors, Maya stopped dead in her tracks. The room had been transformed into a breathtaking architectural sanctuary. In the center stood a massive, custom-crafted drafting table made from a single slab of rich French walnut, its polished surface catching the morning light. Beside it sat an adjustable brass task lamp from the 1930s, polished to a soft sheen, and a brass-trimmed leather storage trunk. On top of the desk lay a slender, velvet-lined box made of polished mahogany. Maya stood frozen, her eyes wide as she took in the space. She looked at the desk, then at the brass lamp, and finally at Genevieve, who was watching her with a quiet, expectant smile. "Genevieve." Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "What is this?" "I had my team track down a few pieces while you were managing the construction team," Genevieve explained softly, walking up beside Maya and placing a gentle hand on the small of her back. The desk was crafted by an artisan in Lyon, its reclaimed walnut from an 18th-century library. "And that box?" Genevieve gestured toward the mahogany case on the table. Maya walked slowly toward the desk, her fingers brushing over the smooth, warm wood. She reached out and opened the brass latch of the mahogany box. Inside, resting on deep green velvet, lay an antique German drafting set made of solid brass and German silver, dating back to the late 19th century. Every compass, divider, and ruling pen was immaculate, polished, and perfectly preserved. Maya let out a quiet, trembling breath, her fingers gently touching the polished brass compass. "I mentioned this set once," Maya whispered, turning her head to look at Genevieve, feeling a sudden, warm lump forming in her throat. "It was during our second dinner in Montauk. I mentioned how my grandfather used to have a set like this when he was an engineer in Taiwan." "You mentioned it for about 30 seconds, Genevieve corrected gently, stepping close to Maya, her arms wrapping around Maya's waist from behind once again, resting her cheek against Maya's shoulder. "You said you always dreamed of having a set like his to draft your most important work." Maya turned in Genevieve's arms, her hands coming up to cup Genevieve's face. The sheer thoughtfulness, the depth of attention, and the boundless love contained in the gesture made Maya's eyes glisten with happy tears. "You remember everything, don't you?" Maya whispered softly. "Only the things that matter to you," Genevieve replied quietly, her grey eyes searching Maya's face with absolute tenderness. "Because you are the most important thing in my life, Maya. Every line you draw in this studio, every project you build from this day forward. I want you to know that you have a foundation here that will never shake." Maya didn't answer with words. She leaned up, pressing her lips to Genevieve's in a fervent, passionate kiss that carried every ounce of love, gratitude, and devotion overflowing in her chest. Genevieve responded instantly, her arms tightening around Maya's waist, pulling her flush against her body as she deepened the kiss, tasting the warmth and sweetness of Maya's breath. They stood together in the sunlit studio, wrapped in each other's arms, the city outside quiet and distant, completely eclipsed by the profound warmth of the space they shared. By 7 o'clock that evening, the blue hour had settled over Manhattan. Instead of ordering from a high-end caterer or dining at an exclusive Manhattan restaurant, they had decided to keep the evening entirely to themselves. They ordered takeout from a tiny, family-owned Italian trattoria in the West Village, 2 boxes of handmade rigatoni with truffle cream, a fresh arugula salad, and a loaf of warm, crusty rosemary focaccia. They sat together on a thick, off-white wool rug spread across the center of the vast living hall. A single low wooden coffee table sat between them, lit by 3 thick pillar candles that cast a flickering, golden glow across the oak floors. The outer glass walls were tinted to a soft, dark twilight, filtering the distant neon lights of the city into a constellation of quiet, warm specks. Maya sat cross-legged, a glass of dark Barolo in her hand, watching Genevieve tear off a piece of warm focaccia bread. Without the sharp-tailored suits or the high-stakes boardroom negotiations, Genevieve looked breathtakingly relaxed. Her dark grey eyes were soft in the candlelight, a subtle, contented smile resting on her lips as she dipped the bread into olive oil and offered it to Maya. Maya leaned forward, taking a bite directly from Genevieve's fingers, her lips lightly brushing against Genevieve's skin. Genevieve's eyes darkened slightly, a quiet, playful spark flashing in her gaze. "You're playing with fire, Miss Lin." "I'm just enjoying my dinner," Maya said innocently, taking a slow sip of her wine, though her eyes held a dangerous, teasing warmth. Is the mighty venture capitalist easily distracted? "Only when my architect looks at me like she's planning my complete surrender," Genevieve murmured smoothly, setting her wine glass down on the wooden table. Genevieve shifted across the small distance between them, sliding onto her side beside Maya on the plush wool rug. She reached out, her fingers warm and deliberate as she traced the line of Maya's jaw, her thumb resting on the soft center of Maya's lower lip. "I surrendered the night I walked into your Chelsea studio, Maya," Genevieve whispered, her voice dropping into that low, magnetic register that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. "And I have zero intention of ever reclaiming my freedom." Maya set her glass down beside Genevieve's. She leaned down, resting her hands on Genevieve's shoulders, looking down into the eyes of the woman who had redefined her entire world. "Good," Maya whispered, her breath fluttering against Genevieve's lips. "Because I'm not letting you go." Maya closed the distance, her lips meeting Genevieve's in a slow, deep, intoxicating kiss. Genevieve sighed into the touch, her hands sliding up under Maya's sweater, her warm palms resting against the soft skin of Maya's waist, pulling her down until they were lying together on the plush rug before the flickering candlelight. The kiss deepened, sweet and passionate, carrying the weight of 4 months of longing, building, and unspoken promises finally fulfilled. The world outside the glass continued its chaotic, ceaseless rhythm, but inside the sanctuary high above the city streets, there was only the soft rustle of linen, the quiet warmth of the fire, and 2 women held tight in an unbreakable embrace. Hours later, the candles had burned down to quiet, low knobs of wax, casting faint golden embers across the darkened room. Outside, a soft autumn rain had begun to fall over Chelsea, the droplets pattering against the heavy glass walls in a rhythmic, hypnotic lullaby, a gentle echo of the storm that had brought them together 4 months ago. Maya lay on her side on the plush rug, her head pillowed securely against Genevieve's chest. A heavy fleece blanket was draped over both of them, keeping out the cool night draft. Genevieve held her close, one arm wrapped around Maya's waist, her fingers idly tracing soft, comforting circles on Maya's arm, while her other hand played with the dark waves of Maya's hair. "Listen to the rain," Maya whispered softly, her hand resting over Genevieve's heart, feeling its steady, soothing beat beneath her palm. "It sounds different now," Genevieve murmured into the crown of Maya's head, her voice rich with peace. "How does it sound?" Maya asked, raising her head slightly to look at Genevieve's face in the dark, warm shadow of the room. Genevieve looked down at her, her grey eyes reflecting the faint city lights outside, soft, deep, and overflowing with an absolute, unconditional love. "It sounds like home," Genevieve answered quietly. Maya smiled, a radiant, beautiful expression that lit up her entire face. She leaned up, pressing one last, tender kiss to the corner of Genevieve's lips, before resting her head back against Genevieve's chest, closing her eyes as the soft sound of the rain wrapped around them both. The blueprint was finished. The structure stood firm. And in the quiet sanctuary of their shared life, the foundation was complete. The floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master dressing room reflected a scene that felt pulled from the pages of a high-fashion editorial. Outside the glass walls of the Hudson Penthouse, November had arrived in Manhattan, bringing with it a biting, starlit chill that swept down the Hudson River. Inside, the ambient temperature was dialed to a warm, comfortable 70s, smelling faintly of jasmine oil and freshly steamed silk. Maya stood in the center of the plush cream rug, holding her dark hair up with one hand as she looked into her reflection. She wore a bespoke floor-length gown of liquid emerald silk, a bias-cut design with a daringly low cowl back that left the pale, elegant column of her spine completely exposed. A pair of quiet, deliberate footsteps echoed across the oak flooring. Genevieve stepped into the frame behind her. She was a vision of severe, breathtaking elegance, dressed in a custom black velvet tuxedo jacket tailored to perfection, worn over a low-cut silk camisole and sleek, high-waisted trousers. Her blonde hair was styled in smooth, retro waves that fell over one shoulder, and around her throat rested a simple, blinding band of platinum and solitaire diamonds. Genevieve didn't say anything immediately. She stopped right behind Maya, her grey eyes traveling slowly down the mirror's reflection, from the loose dark curls spilling over Maya's neck, down the slope of her bare back, to the rich green silk pooling at her feet. "You are going to completely paralyze the Metropolitan Club," Genevieve said softly, her voice low and raspy in the quiet dressing room. Maya met Genevieve's gaze in the glass, a subtle, teasing smile curling at the corner of her lips. "Is that an architectural critique or a personal warning?" "It's a statement of absolute fact," Genevieve replied smoothly. She reached out, her fingers warm against Maya's bare shoulder, and picked up the delicate platinum zipper at the lower lumbar of Maya's dress. With slow, agonizing precision, Genevieve slid the zipper upward, her knuckles brushing against every vertebra of Maya's spine. A sharp, electric shiver ran straight down Maya's back, her breath catching softly in her throat. Genevieve didn't pull her hand away once the dress was secured. Instead, her palms slid forward, wrapping securely around Maya's waist, pulling Maya back until her shoulder blades rested flush against Genevieve's velvet-clad chest. Genevieve leaned down, resting her chin lightly against Maya's cheek, her eyes locking onto Maya's in the mirror. The New York Design Excellence Gala is filled with people who pride themselves on owning beautiful things, Genevieve murmured into Maya's ear, her thumb stroking the soft silk at Maya's hip. "Tonight, they are going to realize that the most brilliant talent in this entire city belongs entirely to me." Maya turned slightly in Genevieve's embrace, her hands resting against the sharp lapels of Genevieve's velvet jacket. She looked up into Genevieve's dark, possessive eyes, feeling a thrill of affection and warmth bloom in her chest. "I don't belong to your portfolio, Miss Vance," Maya teased softly, her index finger tracing the line of Genevieve's lapel down to her waist. "No," Genevieve agreed, her grey eyes softening into something deep, intense, and profoundly gentle as she leaned down to press a warm kiss against Maya's temple. "You belong in my heart. Which is infinitely harder to manage." Maya laughed, a light, joyous sound that filled the room. She reached up, adjusting the lapel of Genevieve's tuxedo jacket before resting her palm against Genevieve's cheek. "Let's go show Manhattan what we built," Maya whispered. The Metropolitan Club on Fifth Avenue was an imposing Gilded-Age mansion of white marble, grand arches, and soaring limestone columns. Tonight, the private driveway on 60th Street was cordoned off with velvet ropes, illuminated by the continuous, bright flashes of press cameras. Town cars and sleek sports sedans pulled up in a steady stream, depositing international developers, famous architects, and Wall Street titans into the crisp autumn air. When Genevieve's black Maybach pulled up to the red carpet, a quiet ripple passed through the gathering crowd of journalists. The driver opened the door, and Genevieve stepped out first. She paused, extending her hand back into the vehicle with natural, effortless gallantry. Maya placed her hand in Genevieve's, stepping out onto the pavement. The brilliant emerald silk of her dress caught the camera flashes, creating a dazzling contrast against Genevieve's midnight velvet suit. The press erupted instantly. "Ms. Vance. Over here. Genevieve, is it true Vance Capital has completely backed the West 24th project? Ms. Lin, a statement on the Hudson Penthouse design nomination." Genevieve didn't answer the shouted questions. Instead, she placed her hand firmly on the small of Maya's bare back, a warm, protective gesture that clearly communicated both support and quiet possession, and guided her smoothly past the media barrier into the opulent marble foyer of the club. Inside, the great hall was a sea of crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, and low, sophisticated laughter. As they walked through the tall archway, heads turned systematically. In the upper circles of New York society, Genevieve Vance was known as an impenetrable fortress, a woman who rarely attended social galas and never brought a guest who wasn't a fellow managing partner. Seeing her arrive alongside the young, brilliant architect who had transformed her flagship property caused an immediate, palpable shift in the room's energy. "Look at them," Maya murmured under her breath, keeping her head held high, a polite, radiant smile on her face as they navigated through the crowd. "Arthur Sterling is staring at us from the bar like he just swallowed a lemon." Genevieve glanced toward the marble bar, where Arthur Sterling stood surrounded by 3 senior investors. A slow, triumphant smirk played on Genevieve's lips as she reached for 2 flutes of vintage champagne from a passing waiter's tray, handing one to Maya. "Arthur spent 3 months telling the board that your design was too radical for the commercial market," Genevieve said quietly, leaning in so close her breath warmed Maya's earlobe. "Now he has to watch you accept the highest architectural award in the state." "The judges haven't announced the winner yet," Maya reminded her, taking a small sip of the crisp, effervescent wine. "The jury panel is notorious for favoring traditional classical designs. The jury panel knows that if they don't give you the gold award, I will buy their foundation and fire them all," Genevieve stated with complete, terrifying calmness. Maya choked softly on her champagne, letting out a stifled, breathless laugh. She hit Genevieve's arm gently with her gloved hand. "You cannot buy the New York Architectural Society, Genevieve." "Try me," Genevieve whispered, her grey eyes sparkling with a wicked, playful light that made Maya's heart do a quiet, breathless somersault. An hour into the reception, The ambient noise of the ballroom grew suffocating. The air was thick with expensive perfume, political jockeying, and endless corporate small talk. Maya stepped away from a group of junior partners who were asking detailed questions about structural glass engineering, stepping toward a quiet set of French doors at the back of the hall. She pushed the heavy wooden door open and slipped out onto the private marble terrace overlooking Central Park. The autumn air outside was cold and crisp, a welcome shock against her warm skin. Below, the trees of Central Park rustled under the moonlight, while the distant lights of Central Park South glowed like golden beads through the dark branches. Maya crossed her arms over her chest, taking a deep, refreshing breath of the night air. The heavy door clicked open behind her. Maya didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The subtle scent of cedar, amber, and black pepper drifted into the cool night air before Genevieve even spoke. Genevieve stepped out onto the terrace, holding her tailored velvet jacket open. Without saying a word, she wrapped the heavy, warm fabric around Maya's shoulders, wrapping her arms around Maya from behind to pull her flush against her body. "Are you cold?" Genevieve asked softly, her chin coming to rest on Maya's bare shoulder, her warm breath insulating Maya against the autumn wind. "I was feeling overwhelmed," Maya admitted, leaning back into the solid, comforting heat of Genevieve's body. She reached up, resting her hands over Genevieve's forearms. "Everyone inside is talking about market value, square footage, and investment returns. None of them care about what the space actually feels like. They don't know how to feel things, Maya," Genevieve murmured, her lips gently pressing against the side of Maya's neck. "They view the world as a spreadsheet. You view it as a living, breathing canvas." Genevieve turned Maya gently in her arms until they were facing each other under the dim glow of the terrace lantern. The cool marble balustrade rested behind Maya, but she felt entirely warm, safe, and held within the circle of Genevieve's embrace. Genevieve reached up, her fingers gently cupping Maya's chin, lifting her head until their eyes met. In the moonlight, Genevieve's grey eyes were clear, fierce, and utterly soft. "When I looked at those blueprints 4 months ago," Genevieve whispered, her thumb tracing the curve of Maya's lower lip, "I didn't buy that penthouse because of the resale value. I bought it because every line you drew felt like a sanctuary I had been searching for my entire life." Maya felt a wave of profound emotion swell in her chest. She reached up, her fingers sliding into the soft waves of Genevieve's blonde hair, pulling her down. "You are my sanctuary, Genevieve," Maya whispered against her lips. Maya closed the distance, her lips meeting Genevieve's in a slow, deep kiss. Out on the quiet terrace, away from the flashing cameras and the corporate eyes inside, the kiss was raw, passionate, and completely unrestricted. Genevieve pulled Maya closer, her hands pressing into the small of Maya's back, drinking in the sweetness of her lips with a hunger that made Maya's knees feel weightless. When a sudden burst of applause echoed from inside the ballroom, indicating the start of the formal award ceremony, Genevieve reluctantly pulled back just a few inches, her forehead resting against Maya's, both of them breathing heavily in the cold night air. "They're starting," Genevieve murmured, a soft, radiant smile breaking across her face. "Ready to claim your trophy?" Maya smiled back, stepping out of Genevieve's jacket and smoothing down her emerald silk dress. "Only if you stand right beside me." "Always," Genevieve answered softly. The grand ballroom was quiet as the chairman of the Architectural Society stood at the golden podium, opening the leather presenter folder. And finally, the chairman announced, his voice echoing through the state-of-the-art sound system, "The Grand Jury Gold Award for Residential Architecture of the Year goes to Maya Lin, for the Hudson Glass Penthouse." The ballroom erupted into deafening applause. Maya stood up, her heart pounding with a sudden, overwhelming surge of pride and joy. Before she stepped toward the stage, she turned to Genevieve. Genevieve didn't care about the hundreds of eyes watching them. She pulled Maya into her arms, kissing her soundly on the cheek, her grey eyes glowing with a fierce, unadulterated pride that brought tears to Maya's eyes. "Go get your award, my love," Genevieve whispered into her ear. Maya walked up the steps to the stage, accepting the heavy bronze statuette from the chairman. She stepped up to the microphone, looking out over the crowded room of New York's elite. Her eyes passed over Arthur Sterling, over the famous developers, and looked directly onto Genevieve Vance standing at the center of the room. "Thank you to the committee," Maya began, her voice clear, confident, and ringing through the hall. "When we design spaces, we often focus on structural integrity, on how much weight a beam can hold against a storm. But a true home is not defined by steel or stone. It is defined by the warmth of the person who occupies it. To Genevieve Vance, thank you for giving my vision a home, and for giving me mine." A quiet, collective gasp passed through the room, followed by another round of thunderous applause. Across the room, Genevieve stood tall, her hands folded over her chest, a single tear catching the light on her cheek, her face illuminated by a smile so radiant and full of pure love that it outshone every crystal chandelier in the room. 2 hours later, the Maybach pulled up to the private entrance of the West 24th Street building. The city outside was quiet, bathed in the deep, peaceful blue of midnight. They rode the private elevator up in total silence, a shared, comfortable quiet filled with the electric residue of triumph and complete contentment. Maya held her bronze award in one hand, while her other hand was locked tightly in Genevieve's. When the elevator doors slid open directly into the Hudson Penthouse, Maya set her award down on the foyer console. The apartment was dark, lit only by the golden constellation of Manhattan lights shining through the clear glass perimeter. Genevieve didn't say a word. As soon as the elevator doors closed behind them, she reached out, pulling Maya against her chest and capturing her mouth in a breathless, passionate kiss that carried them across the dark oak floorboards toward the master suite. Maya let her shoes drop to the floor, her hands untying Genevieve's dark velvet bow tie, throwing it aside as they moved together through the soft twilight of their home. The structure was built. The victory was won. And as they sank together onto the soft bed in the center of their glass sanctuary, wrapped in silk, velvet, and warm skin, Maya knew that every wall she had ever built had led her straight to this broken light, and to the woman who loved her without limits. The quiet that settled over Manhattan on the third Sunday of December arrived without warning, wrapped in the muted gray hues of an impending winter storm. High above West 24th Street, the Hudson Penthouse felt like an island suspended between heaven and river. The vast, 50-foot glass expanse caught the pale, pearlescent morning light, reflecting the quiet movement of cold mist rolling off the Hudson. In the master kitchen, the gentle hum of the espresso machine provided the only soundtrack to the morning. Maya stood barefoot on the heated oak floor, wrapped in an oversized knit cardigan of heather gray. She leaned against the marble counter, holding her favorite white mug, watching the steam rise toward the high ceiling. Her dark hair was loosely pinned with a simple silver clip, a few soft strands resting against her neck. From the north corridor came the soft, rhythmic sound of barefoot steps against wood. Genevieve appeared in the doorway, shedding the severe lines of her usual corporate wardrobe for a black cashmere turtleneck sweater and relaxed cream silk trousers. Her blonde hair fell in effortless, unstyled waves around her shoulders, and her gray eyes, usually sharp enough to dismantle an entire boardroom, were dark, soft, and entirely relaxed. She walked straight toward Maya, ignoring the fresh pot of coffee sitting on the counter. Without a word, Genevieve closed the space between them, reaching out to wrap her long arms around Maya's waist. She pulled Maya flush against her body, burying her face into the warm crook of Maya's neck with a deep, contented sigh. "Good morning," Genevieve murmured, her voice raspy with lingering sleep, her warm breath sending a familiar wave of heat across Maya's skin. "Good morning," Maya answered softly, a tender smile touching her lips. She set her mug down on the marble surface and raised her hands to gently track the line of Genevieve's spine through the soft cashmere. "You slept past 8 o'clock. That might be a historical record for Genevieve Vance." "I had no reason to wake up early," Genevieve murmured, her lips slightly brushing the sensitive skin right behind Maya's ear, making Maya draw a quiet breath. "My company is stable, my penthouse is built, and the woman I love is right here in my arms. Wall Street can wait." Maya turned slightly within the circle of Genevieve's arms, looking up into her gray eyes. Even after weeks of living together in their glass sanctuary, moments like this, raw, quiet, and devoid of external pressure, made Maya's heart beat with a sweet, aching intensity. "You're becoming soft, Miss Vance," Maya teased gently, her fingers trailing up to rest on the crisp line of Genevieve's jawline. "Only for you, architect," Genevieve countered smoothly, her thumb tracing the soft curve of Maya's cheekbone. She leaned in, closing the tiny remaining distance between them, pressing her lips against Maya's in a slow, lingering morning kiss that tasted of rich espresso and quiet devotion. Maya melted into the touch, her fingers tangling in the soft, blonde waves at the nape of Genevieve's neck, pulling her a fraction of an inch closer. When Genevieve finally pulled back, her eyes held a quiet, shimmering intensity that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. "Come into the studio," Genevieve whispered against her lips. "I have something to show you before the snow starts." The North Wing studio had become the undisputed heart of Maya's daily routine. The massive French walnut drafting table sat surrounded by neat stacks of vellum tracing paper, brass instruments, and reference sketches for new projects. However, this morning, the surface of the walnut table was covered by a large, flat leather portfolio bound in dark saddle tan. Maya stepped up to the table, curiosity sparking in her dark eyes. "What is this?" "I thought we agreed not to take on any new commercial clients until the spring." "It isn't a commercial client," Genevieve said, stepping behind Maya, her hands coming to rest on Maya's hips, anchoring her securely. She rested her chin on Maya's shoulder, looking over her work. "Open it." Maya unlatched the heavy brass clasp and unfolded the leather portfolio. Inside lay a set of meticulously rendered topographical maps and architectural site surveys for a 40-acre parcel of land in the Hudson Valley, the very land with the ancient timber barn and private lake they had discussed months ago on the sun-drenched terrace in Montauk. Attached to the top survey was a deed of title, stamped by the Ulster County Land Registry. Maya's eyes scanned the legal document, pausing at the bottom line where the names of the registered owners were listed. Printed in bold, elegant lettering were two names side by side, Genevieve Vance Maya Lynn. Maya stopped breathing. She stared at the paper, the letters blurring slightly as a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion surged in her chest. "Genevieve." Maya's voice was a soft, trembling whisper. "I finalized the acquisition on Friday," Genevieve murmured into her ear, her arms tightening around Maya's waist, holding her close against her chest. "The property is officially ours, Maya. Equal ownership. 50-50. Maya turned around in Genevieve's arms, looking up at her with wide, glistening eyes. "You bought the Hudson Valley land." "We bought it," Genevieve corrected gently, her thumb stroking Maya's hips. I paid the financial purchase price, but you are going to pay the creative price. You are going to design our sanctuary from the ground up. Genevieve reached down, picking up a silver mechanical pencil from the velvet-lined mahogany box on the table and placing it carefully in Maya's hand, closing Maya's fingers around it. No corporate boards. No equity partners. No building inspectors trying to cut costs, Genevieve said, her grey eyes locking onto Maya's with fierce, absolute devotion. Just a blank piece of paper, 40 acres of pine forest, and whatever your heart wants to build for us. Maya looked from the pencil in her hand to the quiet intensity in Genevieve's face. The sheer magnitude of the gesture, the total trust, the permanent commitment, the quiet promise of a shared future, took Maya's breath away. You are completely incredible, Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I am simply investing in our future, Genevieve replied, a soft, triumphant smile curving her lips. She stepped closer, sliding her hand up under Maya's grey cardigan, her warm palm resting against the smooth skin of Maya's waist. And as I've told you before, Maya, you are the only investment I will ever care about. Maya set the pencil down on the walnut table, reached up, and pulled Genevieve down into a passionate, breathless kiss. Genevieve let out a quiet gasp against Maya's mouth before responding with equal fervor, her hands pressing into the small of Maya's back, lifting her slightly until Maya was sitting on the edge of the dark walnut drafting desk. The portfolio lay scattered beside them, forgotten, as Maya wrapped her legs around Genevieve's waist, pulling her impossibly close. The kiss was hot, deep, and overflowing with an unspoken gratitude that radiated through every inch of the quiet studio. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing heavily, their foreheads resting against each other in the soft, diffused light of the morning. Is that a yes to the project, Miss Lin? Genevieve murmured, a playful, breathless smirk touching her mouth. It's a yes to everything, Genevieve, Maya answered softly, her thumb tracing the soft line of Genevieve's lower lip. Always yes. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sky over Manhattan had turned a deep, bruised charcoal, and the first winter snowfall began to descend upon the city. Fat, silent white flakes tumbled down from the sky, drifting past the 50-foot glass walls of the penthouse, coating the steel girders, the terrace railings, and the distant roofs of Chelsea in a soft, pristine blanket of white. Inside, the great living hall was transformed into a warm, glowing cocoon. A fire crackled softly in the black steel hearth, casting long, dancing orange shadows across the dark oak floorboards. The air smelled of burning birchwood, rich cocoa, and sweet cinnamon. They sat together on the massive, low-profile leather sofa positioned directly before the fire. Maya sat tucked between Genevieve's legs, leaning back against Genevieve's chest. A thick, dark green cashmere blanket was draped over both of their legs, keeping out any chill from the terrace doors. Genevieve's left hand rested over Maya's stomach, her long fingers intertwined with Maya's, while her right hand held a thick architectural history book they were casually flipping through. Look at this layout, Maya murmured, pointing to a photograph of a traditional Japanese courtyard house in Kyoto. The way the inner garden acts as a lung for the entire building, we could do something similar for the Hudson Valley House. An interior court filled with native moss and hemlock trees, visible from every room. Genevieve didn't look at the book. She leaned down, resting her cheek against the top of Maya's head, inhaling the clean, familiar scent of her shampoo. As long as the master bedroom faces the lake, Genevieve murmured, her thumb stroking the back of Maya's hand in slow, hypnotic sweeps. I want to watch the morning fog rise off the water while you're still asleep beside me. Maya smiled, leaning her head back against Genevieve's shoulder to look up at her profile in the firelight. You've thought about this a lot, haven't you? I've thought about it every single day since Montauk, Genevieve admitted candidly, her grey eyes meeting Maya's with quiet, unarmored honesty. For 10 years, my life was built on milestones, closing a fund, buying a property, exceeding quarterly earnings. It was efficient, but it was dead. Building a life with you is the first time I've ever looked forward to simply growing old. Maya's throat felt tight. She turned around on the sofa, unmindful of the book slipping to the floor, and straddled Genevieve's lap under the heavy cashmere blanket. She cupped Genevieve's face in both hands, her dark eyes searching the grey depths of Genevieve's gaze, seeing no trace of the formidable titan who controlled Wall Street capital, only the woman who held her heart with absolute tenderness. We are going to build something beautiful up there, Genevieve, Maya whispered, her thumb brushing gently across Genevieve's cheekbone. A home that will stand long after we're gone. We already built it, Genevieve replied softly, reaching up to cover Maya's hands with her own. Right here. Genevieve raised her head, closing the small distance between them, pressing her lips to Maya's in a long, sweet, reverent kiss. The fire crackled softly beside them, sending bright, golden sparks shooting up the chimney, while outside the heavy glass, the white snow fell silently over Manhattan, washing the world clean. Maya wrapped her arms around Genevieve's neck, melting into the warmth and safety of her embrace. There were no more deadlines to meet, no more walls to conquer, and no more secret signals in crowded boardrooms. High above the quiet, snow-covered streets of the city, locked in each other's arms within the sanctuary they had created together, they had everything they would ever need.